Is it on?
Someone's standing on it.
Oh, no.
Good morning, and once again, welcome to Atlanta. Some of you have been around a few days and already have impressions and ideas about what's going on, already have questions, and we'll give you plenty of opportunity for those questions. Some of you are new, and we welcome you especially, and say that we'll have these regular briefings, and they are designed to serve your needs. So if they're not serving your needs, we'd really appreciate your saying something to our staff, Sandra Walker, who's here with the red dress on, and Neil Horton, and the fellow back there creating the static is probably Alfredo Duarte, but sooner or later we'll get it all together. We'd like to begin this morning by introducing two gentlemen who've been very helpful in helping us to create the notion that it is possible to house America's homeless, that it's possible to have affordable housing in the United States of America, and who have demonstrated this with a project here in the city which we went out and laid one brick on about just 3-4 weeks ago. And Mr. Tom McIntyre of the Bricklayers Union and Mr. David Schwartz of the National Housing Institute I'd like to ask them to come forward to say just a little bit about this. And Congressman Atkins from Massachusetts has been involved with this program in Massachusetts, and I'd like to have him say a word about the program in Massachusetts, and particularly what Governor Dukakis has had to do with it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Tom McIntyre, and I'm the International Vice President for the Bricklayers Union, and work with Howard Hansen, who is the regional representative of the Laborers Union here in Atlanta, and together those two international unions built the house with the South Atlantic Trust. Talking about what we were going to talk about earlier today, Howard and I were talking about the fact that many of us were born and raised during a depression. Everybody was poor. Everybody in the neighborhood was poor anyway. And the point is that as we moved along in the thing, you discovered that there's a lot of richness in poverty, and so those kinds of richness and whatever, that's what we're doing in Atlanta. That's what we do in all of the neighborhoods that we're in. We're sharing in the richness that where our roots were, where we came from, and that's what we're doing in the affordable housing business. And we do that by the utilization of our pension funds. We leverage our pension fund monies. We borrow money from banks at a rate less than what most developers can do it. We have mayors like Andrew Young who give us the land for nothing. We are a zero overhead developer. And those three items in Massachusetts have allowed us to build affordable housing in probably the hottest real estate market in America. Just as an example, we built 18 units in one of the neighborhoods in the city of Boston. Our first endeavor, we built them and sold them for $70,000. They were assessed at $140,000. So we built quality. We're proud of what we do. It represents the best, and certainly one of the issues of this campaign, to the extent that it represents union pension funds and banks and good jobs and good wages, and architects and engineers and community groups and city government and state government, guys like Ray Flynn and Mike Dukakis. And that's what Dukakis is all about. And we hope in the next 8 years that under his leadership, we in the unions, and particularly in the building trades, that in the next 8 years there will be nothing more fulfilling and more rewarding than helping to rebuild the cities and the neighborhoods of this country and share in the richness that all of those neighborhoods have to offer. Thank you very much.
Now, Mr. David Schwartz of the National Housing Institute.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad to be here. I want to speak to you this morning about the national scene. I want to say that current federal policies have locked the door and hidden the key to home ownership for millions, more than 2 million of our young families. Since the early 1980s, what have we seen in the United States in terms of housing? A number of very troubling trends. A decline in home ownership for the first time since World War II. A dramatic and ugly and explosive increase in homelessness. A shortage, a critical shortage in every state of the union in affordable apartments. A nightmare, a literal nightmare of housing crisis for the poor, with more poor people, with less money, seeking fewer available apartments of declining quality at higher rents. And finally, a pattern of stagnation and decline, even in the physical quality of our housing stock. America has been receding in the 1980s, the federal government retreating from the great goal of decent, affordable shelter for all our people. Accordingly, we came to Atlanta with Tom McIntyre and the other members of the labor unions, with the Campaign to End Hunger and Homelessness, with the South Atlanta Land Trust, to symbolize that the federal government must come back into the housing picture, that we could build as a coalition one house, but we would need, and as we did, and you're going to see, and we're inviting you shortly to come to that house, a beautiful house. We could build one house. That coalition could build a house, and maybe several hundred houses in Boston and across the country. It's an important coalition, but we need to build 2 million of those houses, ladies and gentlemen, for the families that have been locked out of home ownership in the 1980s, and it's clear we need federal involvement to do that. We conceived of the idea of building an affordable new house in Atlanta as a graphic symbol that America's low and moderate income housing needs could be met, can be met, if the federal government once again will join us as a partner, a working partner with American families and with labor unions and nonprofit community-based organizations. When I first suggested this idea a couple of months ago, I never thought this project would take on the national significance that it has, but the hard work, the effective work, if I may say so, the brilliant work of my coalition, of our coalition partners, especially the bricklayers and the laborers unions, the Campaign to End Hunger and Homelessness, and the South Atlanta Land Trust, has made this a reality. I think this then becomes a model project for this nation, appropriately showcased in Atlanta, and with the help of Mayor Young, I think this has been very successful. As I said, our partnership has been able to build one house. And yes, this kind of partnership can build other houses across America. It is a model. But mostly it's a call. It's a plea to the federal government and to those civic leaders gathering this week in Atlanta to bring the federal government back into the housing picture, to join us in a partnership, a coalition of conscience, to build housing for the American people. Finally, I want to say this. There is a new partnership capable of being built with the industry, with labor, with nonprofit organizations, with private charitable entities, and with American families. But that partnership needs the federal government to take financial leadership. It's not enough to have exhortation. It's not enough to have nice words. It's not enough to have words in a platform. We've got to tell this story in bricks and mortar. That's what we came to Atlanta to do, and it will require an aggressive, effective, cost-effective federal government to help. At this time, I would like to introduce Congressman Atkins. He is the congressman for the 5th Congressional District of Massachusetts, which is north and west of Boston. He is also chairman of the Democratic Party in the state of Massachusetts, clearly a friend of housing, a friend of all of us. Congressman Atkins.
Thank you very much. This is a wonderful project, and I think one that we can all be proud of. The fine work of a group of very selfless activists. But this project can only help a few people for a short time. We've watched in Massachusetts, and we see here in Atlanta, the tremendous energy, the tremendous enthusiasm and commitment and desire for change that people have. And these partnerships, and no state has done more than Massachusetts in housing partnerships, in bringing in labor unions, in bringing in tenants, in bringing in business and the Chamber of Commerce and the downtown real estate people, and in bringing and involving the state and the local governments. The missing partner has been the federal government. The federal government has not only walked away from that partnership, sued for divorce from that partnership for change that's shaped this country for 44 years until 1980. The federal government, indeed, in Massachusetts has oftentimes been the major obstacle, with a blind kind of bureaucratic mentality coming out of the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's time for a change. And if there's one governor in America who understands that, it's been Mike Dukakis. Massachusetts has had more creative housing programs, everything from involving Tommy McIntyre and his Bricklayers Union, involving the International and use of their pension funds, in taking personal leadership and laying brick by brick a plan for a housing future of this country. We can build the American dream. We will build the American dream. And here in Atlanta, this convention will be a start for that, and this home is a symbol of that opportunity.
I'd like to thank the Bricklayers Union for this contribution to our city, for this example. We've had a number of these in the last few weeks. There will be a bus available to take any of you who would like to go to the site and bring you back to here.
Bring them back here, but some other special arrangements can be made.
Made for the Omni. So right after the press conference, anybody that would like to ride out to this site, it's about 5 minutes away from here. Thank you very much. Okay. Any questions about this? Okay. Thank you very much. Good to see you. And welcome, Chairman Congressman Atkins, and we're glad to have you in town.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and Mayor, Atlanta is certainly, I think, a view of what one person can do, one individual, one public official, working with an active state government. And we hope very soon to have a federal partner for you to work with.
Very good. Thanks a lot. Okay. If you let me make a couple of announcements. One, the party this evening for media is at the Georgia World Congress Center starting about 8:30 and going on. And all of the media representatives and their wives and guests are invited. See what else. I think that the Jackson Caravan is expected to arrive somewhere about 3 o'clock at Piedmont Park. And I think if you would be in contact with are we going to be able to keep up with them in terms of exactly where they are? Sandra, will we have any information about where they are en route? The Jackson campus. Okay, we will have information here, so your press numbers from here should be able to give you some information. If there are any questions about anything else, if you would go to the microphones and identify yourselves, we'd be glad to try to address those. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 microphones.
Mayor Young, Renee Kemp from Channel 13 in Birmingham. And while I'm up here, I'm going to, if I can, get you to respond to 3 questions. Since we are from Birmingham, and since you do have a relationship with Birmingham that goes very far back, and with Dick Arrington, our mayor, I'm wondering what your reaction is to Mayor Arrington, your counterpart in Birmingham, having been tapped as a peacemaker pretty late in the game, rather belatedly. What is your reaction to that, and what kind of input can he have?
Now, I think that Mayor Richard Arrington is one of the most respected mayors in this city, in this country. He's also one of the people in this party that everybody has confidence in. And I think it's not late, it's very early. We're going to have a long time working together. That's what we're seeing now. We're seeing campaigns that have been competitive suddenly coming to the point where all of these differences have got to be reconciled, and I think he can be very instrumental in helping that process.
Okay, the second question, what is the significance of the Fannie Lou Hamer Convention, personally to you?
Well, I was one of those that helped recruit Fannie Lou Hamer as part of our citizenship education program. And the Fannie Lou Hamer Convention represents those people who are basically morally and passionately concerned about the problems of the poor, about the problems of those people who are not yet full participants in the American economy. It's very appropriately named, and Fannie Lou Hamer also symbolized the entry of a new South into the Democratic Party. The Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party challenge to the 1964 convention was really what started the reform process. And it probably deserves credit for reclaiming the Senate for the Democratic Party, because it was those Democrats that started, those black Democrats that began to become full participants in the Democratic Party in 1964 that ultimately swung the elections in 1986 and gave Democrats control of the United States Senate. So I see it as an opportunity to keep this visionary and moral agenda before the mainstream of the Democratic Party. It is clearly the prophetic wing of the party.
Okay, finally, if you would,
Though they may not want to be considered a part of the party completely, but let's say they're a conscience.
okay. The demonstrators haven't arrived yet, but we know that they are on their way. Comparisons have been made in terms of the numbers of demonstrators, of course, with Chicago. And in response, you have said that it's going to be 100 degrees in Atlanta, and they can fry on the sidewalks. Some have thought that that was a rather callous statement to make. Do you still feel that way? And how can you guarantee the restraint of your officers compared to the restraint that was exercised in Chicago?
Well, one, there was no restraint exercised in Chicago, and it was a different situation altogether. There was a heightened emotional movement coming out of assassinations of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. All of our colleges were in turmoil. There was a tremendous degree of hostility to the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party was being blamed for the war in Vietnam. And there was a police force that was in Chicago that was not accustomed to dealing with large demonstrations. I think all of those things are different here. One, I simply said that we are not going to arrest people and we're not going to have confrontations with police unless people do damage to person or property. And if people damage persons or property, they will be arrested and charged under state statutes, and there will be serious charges brought. But for nonviolent demonstrations, including people laying down in the street, blocking traffic, I say that's, we're not going to be throwing people in jail or dragging people around or creating media events that I think they can sit there until they and the Sun work out some reconciliation. I thought I was being very compassionate.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Brian Kelleher with Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. What, if anything, do you think Michael Dukakis owes to Jesse Jackson at this point?
I think he probably owes Jesse Jackson a lot of credit for his having the nomination. And one of the things that Jesse Jackson has done is that he has defined the territory such that Michael Dukakis is seen by the nation as a moderate, centrist member of the Democratic mainstream, and that Jesse Jackson has very clearly distinguished between his positions and those of Dukakis. There is a Republican attempt to try to group anybody who thinks and feels as a radical liberal, you know, with no sense of responsibility. And yet I think Michael Dukakis has been able to present his position very clearly because of the full spectrum of candidates that were represented in the primary process. And I think he owes Jesse Jackson a good deal of credit for defining certain issues that I think are critical for the country and making them a part of this campaign, and so that they come across now as mainstream issues rather than you know, way out in left field issues. The two main ones would be homelessness and South Africa. A third might be a notion of universal voter participation.
So he owes him nothing other than credit.
Well, I think that that's one way of looking at it. My analysis of the situation is that it's not, the problem we're facing now is not really it's not a Jesse Jackson problem. It's the same problem I saw with the Carter campaign. And the way I saw it in 1976, those of us from Georgia were seen as a kind of a Georgia mafia in 1976. In fact, they even used that term. And suddenly it dawned on me what they were talking about. We had a few Baptists and a few Methodists and a few Jews. We didn't have any Catholics. We had nobody whose name ended in vowels. Nobody that grew up in the big cities of the North. You know, we basically were a provincial regional campaign that won the country. And there was a lot of hostility against us then, until we perceived that what had to happen was that this Carter campaign, which was basically a homegrown Georgia campaign, had to open up to the political leadership and tacticians from our big cities of the North. We had to involve people from out West. And we had to get some of the ethnic diversity of the party represented in the thinking of the national campaign. We had to go from being a campaign which was competitive with the rest of the party to a campaign that included all of the party. And that's always a difficult process. And you can view, and I think one of the mistakes that's been made, I think, in the press, is to view the campaign process as a winner-take-all. So everybody other than Michael Dukakis can sit down and relax. They're going to go on and win it single-handedly with all of the wisdom that Massachusetts can conjure up. It just doesn't work that way, and it never has, and it never will. And I'm sure the Dukakis campaign understands that. And already, I think that the reaching out to Lloyd Bentsen in Texas was clearly an understanding that that part of the Democratic Party was going to be included in the thinking and action of this coming campaign and in a Dukakis administration. I think Jesse symbolizes the fact, or is asking, that let's send the same signal in some way to the liberal to progressive wing of the party, which represents a lot more than Jesse Jackson. It probably represents organized labor, it represents the Hispanic community, it represents unemployed workers, it represents farmers who have lost their land. And I think that what this convention is all about is pulling a party together under the leadership of Michael Dukakis. And everything I know about him and the people who work with him would say to me that it's simply a matter of time before the questions of inclusion that Jesse Jackson happens to be raising will be a part of the discussion.
Mayor Young, David Treadwell from the LA Times. I have two questions. One, yesterday in an interview with our paper, Jesse's campaign manager said that what Jesse wants is to be a full partner in this campaign and equal participation at all levels. In essence, although this isn't his term, Jesse becomes kind of a third name on the ticket. What's your reaction to that? Is that a kind of demand that Michael Dukakis can accede to or need to? It's an unprecedented kind of step if it were taken.
I think partnership is something that has to be defined by the partners themselves. And I think that Jesse Jackson can be a very valuable partner in this process. But working out the terms of that partnership is something that we're going to have to do. I would say that we need a broad-based partnership, that we've got to pull the whole party together, and we've got to win this as one party.
It's also been said Michael Dukakis would look better to moderate whites if he stands, tough and tall against Jesse. Doesn't he run into a dilemma here? How does he?
No, I think that Michael Dukakis just has to be Michael Dukakis. That he has to be a man of integrity, a man with his who is able to listen and receive advice and guidance, but ultimately make his own decisions and take responsibility for those decisions. It's something Bush never quite been able to do, and I think that would very easily distinguish the candidates. And I think what you're having here is basically a campaign on character and integrity to a great extent. And one of the things that I think people will judge on is how he deals with problems. Right now in the news, Jesse seems to be the problem. So there's no question that how he deals with that problem is going to be influencing a lot of people. But there will be other problems in the course of the week, and there'll be other problems throughout this campaign. And the candidate's reaction and response to those problems is basically going to determine their electability, I think.
Other question concerns the housing. Housing and the homeless. How critical do you consider the homeless problem in Atlanta? And what efforts has your administration taken or is taking to combat the problem?
The homelessness is a serious problem in Atlanta. We have a housing population that fluctuates between 5,000 and 10,000. We feed somewhere between 14,000 and 20,000 people a day in a variety of mostly religious, church and synagogue-sponsored feeding and homeless shelters. The city has developed 3 or 4 facilities with city funds to handle the overflow. But the main burden of the problem presented by homelessness in our city is being borne by the churches and synagogues. We could not do it without them. We've gotten very little help from the state government or the federal government. It's been largely the city, the churches, the religious community, and the private sector that have responded basically to provide temporary shelter. The project by the Bricklayers Union, a similar project by Habitat for Humanity, demonstrated very quickly that it is possible to build affordable housing. And we have tried to use our community development funds to buy down the cost of land, to prepare for some of these projects. But we're talking at most about 22, 23 houses. We probably could use in the neighborhood of 1,000 units a year of low and moderate income housing, minimum. And that, I think, a program of that kind of scope, I think could only be done with some federal assistance. A little closer to. I can't say it on television. We have more downtown hotel rooms in walking distance to our convention city than any city in the world. And anybody that, I mean, there are about 20,000 hotel rooms within walking distance of the Omni. And those are available. This is not a big convention for us. We will have 20, 25,000 people here, but 2 weeks ago we had 40,000, and 2 months ago we had 70 and 80,000, 1 month after it, and we've never had the complaints because we didn't have the 15,000 journalists along with them. But I think what it is where we do have a shortage, we admit, we have a shortage of suites. And when you get all of the big shots of the world coming to town and everybody that's used to having a suite can't get a suite, then it looks like a shortage. But there are plenty of hotel rooms. And they're hotel rooms at half the cost they're used to paying anywhere else. And it's at least in any other major convention city. And I think that, well, I was glad to hear the criticism, frankly. I think I was misquoted on that. I thought it was good to have people with lowered expectations coming in here because it makes it easier for us to live up to if they're not expecting too much. And I think people leaving here will say that they've had a good convention. I don't know that there's any other facility in America where you could have a convention with the two venues, with the Georgia World Congress Center with 32 football fields of space indoors, air-conditioned, where much of the convention activity is going to be going on all day long, and then the evening activities will essentially be televised from the Omni. But much of the business of the convention and most of the social life of the convention is going to be going on right there adjacent. You know, I was staying at the American Hotel in New York in 76, and it takes you a half hour to go from 55th down to wherever it is, 8th Avenue to Madison Square Garden. You may be at the Galleria, which is on Highway 285 and 75, but you can make it down here in 20 minutes. And I think if you look at distance, people are a long ways away, but I think you'll find that things are fairly accessible and that the convention is going to work pretty well. If it doesn't, you know, we're here every morning, come back and complain. We'll do what we can to correct it. Even get your hotel room downtown if you don't like the one you got.
Mark Prager, ABC News. Mayor Young, what does this convention mean to the city of Atlanta in economic terms? How much money do you expect it will bring in?
We really don't know how much money this convention will bring in. The Republicans used $60 million in Dallas as a figure. Democrats don't usually spend that kind of money. And much of the money that's being spent is money that we're spending hosting the convention. What we think is that the convention will bring benefits to the city of Atlanta that will accrue well into the future. That we think we've been doing some things, you know, we know we've got all the problems every other city has. And we think we are developing some solutions toward those problems. One is we've been able to make up for the loss of federal government funding. We've used federal government funding very well in the construction of our highway system and the construction of our mass transit system. But when we didn't have much federal government funding for an airport, we found a way to put together a public-private partnership for an airport. We've done the same thing with development of underground Atlanta, which is not ready yet. We've attracted about $52 billion worth of private investment into this region in the last 5 years. We think that where this convention will really pay off is that it will establish Atlanta in the mind of the world as a place to come, a place to do business, a place to invest, a place from which to export. It wouldn't hurt if it gave us a little edge on our competitors in attempting to bring the 1996 Olympics back here. We see this as part of a long-range plan for developing Atlanta as one of the great cities of the 21st century. I won't be around to be mayor then, because I'm through in 1989, but we hope we're laying the kind of foundation on which all of the succeeding mayors will be able to continue to develop. I'm building on the foundation that was laid by Maynard Jackson and by Sam Massell, by Ivan Allen, and by Mayor Hartsfield. So we probably will get more good from what you write, even when it's critical, than we will from the money spent. Most of the conventions that come here, frankly, will spend more money than Democrats. Democrats almost like, some of our good church brethren. They come to town with a $20 bill and the 10 Commandments, one in each hand. They leave town and don't break either one. Democrats will probably bend a few commandments, but they're not going to spend much money.
If you had to put a dollar figure, how many $1 million have you estimated?
Oh, I think the Chamber of Commerce will say somewhere around 30, 40, but nobody really knows. I tell you, there's probably $30 million worth of electronic equipment in the Omni and the World Congress Center. That's probably the largest single expenditure of any convention. I think in 1980 there were 3 of these satellite hookups, and I think we've got something like 103 now. The electronics of this convention is clearly the largest cost. And I don't know how much of that goes to us. I guess Bell South is doing a pretty good business.
Sir, Alan Cox, WCCO Television, Minneapolis, St. Paul. We've just arrived here, but some of the early coverage of the preparations of Atlanta suggests the city's going to some extremes to put that best foot forward. That the homeless, some homeless have been housed temporarily in apartments that they probably can't stay in for a long time, and other steps. Do you think Atlanta is going to be putting forward a false front during this week?
Not really, because what we've done with the homeless is we moved one group of homeless out that were living under the decks around the World Congress Center. But I think you'll see plenty of homeless folk this week. They are all over, and we might even have more coming in. The homeless people that were moved for security reasons. We will probably, we do the best we can with the homeless, which isn't good enough. But we will continue doing that. We've had a homeless task force going now for at least 5 years, and most of the shelter has been provided by churches. There are 51 churches and synagogues that have actively opened their doors and housed people and given them a meal in the evening. Our police usually will pick up homeless people and take them to the shelters. We use police vans to do that. And we've been doing that all along, trying to just make sure. We were introduced to the problem of homelessness in 1981, just before I had been elected, but I had not been inaugurated as mayor. It was the The first week in December, we had normally it doesn't get cold here till January, but we had a sudden freeze, not a Minnesota freeze, but for us, it dropped down to about 5 degrees the first week in December, and we found 17 frozen bodies in the course of a week. And we immediately began to open the doors of our churches, of any available space we had in schools, to try to get people in off the streets. That was a combined effort by the churches and synagogues and by the city and the police force. The police force just began to pick up people and take them out of the cold. And the task force on the homeless, which was formed then, has continued to try to deal with this problem. And we're struggling with it, but we're a long way from solving it.
How have you helped homeless?
Excuse me, could you give me your name and your...
Sorry. Aaron Filmer, Children's Express.
How have I helped homeless?
Homeless and hungry kids in America.
And you're from Children's Express?
Yes.
Welcome. And you all did a very good job with every convention I've been to. In fact, I think in 1976, it was Children's Express that scooped everybody and named Walter Mondale as the vice presidential choice. And so you're in a good journalistic tradition. And I don't know what news you can break on the rest of these guys during this week, but you know, nose around, I'm sure you can figure something out. We haven't done much. In fact, you're already asking questions that are embarrassing. Forgive me. We have shelters for women and children, and the city has a daycare program for children. We also, during the summer, have what we call Camp Best Friends, and it's a free day camp which involves a lunch, it involves swimming, it involves tutorial programs, it involves computer camps, it involves almost a full range of play and sports and academic activities, arts and crafts and drama and dance. And we will have about 10,000 children between the ages of roughly 6 and 12 that are involved in our city all day long. And I tell you, I would be very glad to see to it that you got a chance to visit one of our Camp Best Friends and see how it operates. So if you can get with Sandra Walker, our press secretary, we'll make sure you have access to the children's program.
Okay, how do you think the caucus will help homeless and hungry kids in America?
Well, I think the caucus will help homeless kids in America because he's done a good job in the state of Massachusetts in trying to build housing. He used government funds in the state of Massachusetts to try to stimulate private development. And he got the business community, the banks and the insurance companies to invest in low and moderate income housing. And Massachusetts probably has done more to develop housing in a place where land is very expensive and where building costs are very high. You heard the president of the Bricklayers Union, vice president of the Bricklayers Union, say that they built a home for $70,000 that was assessed at $140,000. And by Atlanta standards, that's pretty expensive. We can build a home in Atlanta still for about $30,000. And it would probably be assessed, even in the Atlanta market, at something like $70,000 to $80,000. So I think that when he begins to try to do some of the things, try to help us in cities, to do some of the things nationally that he's been able to do in Massachusetts, I think it's going to work out even better in places down south than it has in the big cities of the north. One of the things we learned is that it's easier to house people where they are, that Atlanta has always had an interest in rural housing because we could build homes in smaller towns for $20,000. The same house in Atlanta would cost you $50,000. In Boston, or New York, it'd probably cost you $150,000. And so instead of people having to migrate to where creative programs are, it makes sense to have creative programs nationally to try to house people, where they are. Thank you very much.
Kirk Victor, National Journal Magazine. Aren't you and the other speakers today in danger of, in your advocacy of greater role for the federal government, in danger of painting the Democratic Party again as the advocate of bigger government and bigger bureaucracy, et cetera, rather than emphasizing the more private initiatives?
Well, I think everything I've said has tried to indicate that what we've done is use limited government funds to leverage private dollars. And we see the government not as just giving government money to solve the problem, but essentially using government money to buy down interest rates, to make land available, and to keep the cost low. Would you like to say something about that?
Yes, we would.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. I'd like to comment because in addition to my role as chairman of the National Housing Institute, I did serve on and do serve on the Democratic Platform Committee. And I think the Democratic plank on housing that was unanimously adopted in Denver will be recommended unanimously both by the Dukakis and Jackson campaigns to this convention assembled here in Atlanta right now, is not a big government program. It's an appropriate investment in America program. You can't build housing for nothing. Tommy McIntyre and the laborers' unions, bricklayers' unions, have come here to Atlanta to talk about a zero profit development, but that didn't mean it was free. Obviously, housing costs some money, but the returns on the investment to America, returns in jobs, returns in new businesses, housing is an economic winner for the American people. Our studies at the National Housing Institute show that in the 1980s, the downturn in home ownership has cost America $200 billion in economic activity, 3 million jobs not created, and over $20 billion in federal tax revenues. That's what it's cost. Housing's an economic winner. If the Democratic Party stands for appropriate investment in housing, and I believe that platform plank will be adopted, we aren't talking about big government, we're talking about smarter government.
So it's not going to result in for example, a greater deficit and other...
No, it will not. As a matter of fact, I am suggesting to you that housing is an economic winner for the nation and for the government. This isn't a big government program. It's an appropriate investment program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we come back here tomorrow? And Jesse Jackson's itinerary is that he'll be in Chattanooga at 12 noon, and he should be in Atlanta, Piedmont Park by 4 p.m. And we'll see you tomorrow or tonight at the media party.
The buses are out front for you. We apologize for the problems with the sound system. We'll have those kinks worked out this evening. Thank you.